Okay, there's a couple more things we have to do before we get to the pieces that I just want to do an analysis of. We're going to do those in the next section, but I want to cover a couple little odds and ends in this section. Diminished chords, augmented chords, which I don't think I've even mentioned yet. And there's good reason why I haven't mentioned those yet, and I'll get to that shortly. And then adding octaves to chords, and then just kind of how chords work on a guitar, which is worth a special mention, and you'll see why when we get there. So let's talk about diminished chords. We've seen diminished chords, right? Here is our friendly diatonic chord progression that we know so well now. This is in the key of C. So we have a C major chord because the root is C, and the pattern goes major, and the second one is minor, third one is minor, fourth one is major, fifth one is major, sixth one is minor, seventh one is diminished. Let's talk about that little thing right now. So this diminished chord. Now in the key of C, the diminished chord happens on a B, the seventh scale degree. Now remember, whenever you're trying to figure out scale degrees, you can also go backwards. So if we were in the key of C and we wanted to find where the diminished chord would be, or we just wanted to find the seventh, we can always just go down 1/2 step from C, right? That works in any key. You can just go backwards and go down. But let's look up here. Okay, so what is this thing? It probably will make a lot more sense now, and hopefully you'll see why I waited until now to talk about it. Because what we just talked about was how all triads are a stack of two different thirds, right? There's a third between the first two notes and a third between the top two notes, right? And in major and minor triads, those are always going to be opposite. So if the bottom one is a major triad, the top one's going to be a minor triad, right? So here we have a major triad between C and E, which means E and G is a minor triad, right? And watch this. We could jump up 2 chords. Here's that same E and G again, right? And we know that because right here, E and G was a minor triad, right here, it must be also a minor triad, which means the top, G and B, is going to be a major triad. Let's just keep going with this. Let's jump ahead 2 more chords. Here's that G and B again, right? And we just decided that it was a major triad, so it must be a minor triad between B and D, right? Anyway, I don't want this to confuse you. I'm doing that to point out all the kind of intersections between the different chords. It's actually kind of a beautiful system. So let's talk about this diminished chord. Let me just write it by itself so we can really just kind of zoom in on it. Okay, here's what makes this special. This one breaks that rule of if one of them is a minor triad, the other one's a major triad. Okay, let's just go through and find the 2 triads in this. B to D. Let's pull up our keyboard. Okay, B to D is, so here's a whole step, and then here's a half step. That's D, and that's B. So a whole step plus a half step means minor triad, or minor third, sorry. So this is a minor third between B and D. Okay, now let's find D and F. Now by our logic, this should be a major triad. So we look at B to F, right? So here's a whole step, here's a half step. So D to F is also a minor triad. So this one is made up of 2 minor thirds. I just said triad again. Thirds is what I should have said. 2 minor thirds is what this is made up of. So that breaks the rule, right? That breaks the rule of all our major triads and minor triads. This has 2 minor thirds in it, which is why I think when I first introduced it, I think I said sometimes we consider it kind of like a super minor chord, which it kind of is, right? Because it's made up of 2 minor thirds instead of 1 minor third and 1 major third as all the other triads that we've looked at are. So that makes an interesting little conundrum, right? And the reason that it happens is just because of the way the notes are laid out. one of those is always going to fall right here, right on the 7th scale degree, if we're in a major key. If we're in a minor key, it falls in a different spot. We're going to talk about minor keys later. But in a major key, it's always on the 7th. So we tend not to use that chord all that much in things like pop music and more traditional sounding music. In classical music, we do use it a lot because it has a good, like we talked about tendency tones before, it's got a good tendency. Watch this, let's resolve it. This, and what I want to do at the end of it is I'm going to put, let's not do that, let's make it easy. A G major chord, or a C major chord, sorry. All right, so it goes, this is relatively dissonant because it's not a beautiful chord, but it resolves nicely to the key, right, to C major chord. So we like it for that. Now the other thing about diminished chords that's interesting is that there is no perfect fifth in it. Now the perfect fifth means if we counted up half steps, we would find these fifths are all what we call perfect fifths, meaning they are all the exact same number of half steps. Let's figure it out. So C to G. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Or if we want to think in whole steps, 1, 2, 3 and a half. Okay, that's not, you don't need to memorize that because we have better ways of finding the fifth, right? But if we did do that with this, we wouldn't get it. We would get what's called a tritone here, or sometimes we call it a diminished fifth, which means it's 1/2 step short of a fifth. B to F is the tritone. It's the kind of the ugliest interval. If you were in the Middle Ages and you played that at your church, you would get your head chopped off. They did not like, I'm serious about that, they did not like their tritones. It was the devil's harmony. So that's what the diminished chord is. There are some other weird properties about diminished chords, but for now, I just wanted to explain how this relates to our triads, which is all triads are either, if it's a minor triad, it's a minor third with a major third on the top. Oops, I shouldn't be pointing at that one while I do it. Here's a minor triad. So minor third with a major third at the top, or a major triad with a major third at the bottom and a minor third at the top. The diminished one is the exception. It's a minor third at the bottom and a minor third at the top. That's how the diminished triad works.